Who really runs the world? That's a question that begs some thought. While some of you might be quick to think of your favorite celebrities with their millions of followers on Instagram, and others might even point out heads of state and the military might they control, both answers could not be farther from the truth. It is not far-fetched to understand that money and power control the world, and those that bear such can move your favorite celebrities, heads of state, and even entire nations like chess pieces on a board. In today's video, we will discuss the most powerful families that secretly run and own the world. I'm talking about established family dynasties that have their hands in everything. I mean everything, from commodities, economical, financial, and military machines, you name it. They run it all. Wouldn't you want to know the alleged families behind the supposed veil that, like puppeteers, make the world dance at their hallowed feet? So hold on tight as I, in hushed tones of secrecy, dive deeper into the most powerful families that secretly own the world. Let's jump right in. Starting on the list is the well-known Rothschild family. This is perhaps the most famous of all European banking dynasties, which for some 200 years exerted great influence on the economic and, indirectly, the political history of Europe. The lasting effects of their involvement can still be felt today and seen throughout the world map from the territorial borders of Europe's great nations. The family empire was established by Meyer Amschel Rothschild in the 18th century and grew in prominence under his 5 sons, Nathan Meyer, James Meyer, Solomon Meyer, Karl Meyer, and Amschel Meyer. The Rothschilds were pioneers in the development of international finance, having established branches in London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples, in addition to their native Frankfurt. From a small business engaged in trading goods and foreign exchange, the Rothschild family grew their business activities to include merchant banking, private banking, asset management, mergers and acquisitions, insurance, venture capital, pensions and investments, sovereign debt, and commodities. They have also invested in major infrastructure projects such as bridges, tunnels, and railways, and, most notably, the Suez Canal. Other business interests include hotels, media, transportation, and wine. Originally, the family started out as dealers in luxury items and traders in coins and commercial papers. Meyer and his sons eventually became bankers, to whom the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars of 1792 to 1815 came as a piece of great good fortune. Meyer and his eldest son, Amschel, supervised the growing business from Frankfurt, while Nathan established a branch in London in 1804, Jacob settled in Paris in 1811, and Solomon and Karl opened offices in Vienna and Naples, respectively, in the 1820s. The wars for the Rothschilds meant loans to warring princes, smuggling, as well as legal trading in key products such as wheat, cotton, colonial produce, and arms, and the transfer of international payments between the British Isles and the continent that Napoleon vainly attempted to close to British trade. Over the decades, the family continued to adapt to the times from the Industrial Revolution, participating in that economic growth spurt throughout Europe with their railway, coal, ironworking, and metallurgical investments, to expanding after the 1850s, getting a stake in the world trade of oil and non-ferrous metals. To date, the family wealth and influence have somewhat dwindled as the turn of the century saw other houses begin to rise, and also internal turmoil faced throughout the ages had taken its toll on the Rothschild way of life. But despite all that, the family is still very much powerful relative to other organizations, and they still have wealth in the billions. With a bloodline like the Rothschild, you can never truly know what they can do next. But even as famous as the Rothschilds are, the next family on our list perhaps eclipsed them in infamy alone. Just say the name Rockefeller and watch as conspiracy theorists' ears prop up in curiosity and anticipation. In perhaps what is cited as the most famous family name, the Rockefeller family has existed for decades, holding various offices of power throughout government structures and making their undisputed mark on the economic landscape. The Rockefellers' story, as with so many major business successes, has a humble beginning. It starts in Cleveland, Ohio in the 1850s, where young John D. Rockefeller's family settled after moving from upstate New York. Young John had little professional schooling, but he did learn accounting, and eventually went into business as a commodities broker. He and his partners did quite well, thanks in part to the Civil War, which broke out just as Rockefeller was beginning his business career. Eventually, the profits from this venture were used to purchase an oil refinery. Rockefeller brought some partners into this new venture. He and his associates then proceeded to slowly take over the oil refining business. Rockefeller wanted to avoid the speculative notion of actually finding the oil and focus on the inevitable next step once the oil has been found: refining the black gold. Due in no small part to Rockefeller's shrewd management, cost-cutting measures, and conservative financial management, he and Standard Oil, his company, proceeded to dominate the oil industry, at one point controlling 90% of all oil American trade. His dominance was so much so that Standard Oil attracted the attention of the United States government, which in 1911 ordered that it be broken up. At this point, the move did little to hurt Rockefeller's fortunes. Having already retired from day-to-day operations in the late 1890s, he received an equal share in the 34 baby standards that were created. The very idea that ExxonMobil, which boasts a current market capitalization of over $360 billion, was just a piece of the Standard Oil empire is enough to tell the tale of how powerful and wealthy the Rockefeller family had become. After his death, a trust was created, as well as several other entities designed to manage the family money, all to ensure that Rockefeller's descendants continue to live as only Rockefellers can. The trusts are, to this day, controlled by the male heirs to the fortune, as well as other powerful trustees who dole out annual stipends to the many Rockefeller heirs. Much of the current wealth is pooled and managed at Rockefeller & Co., of which David Rockefeller Jr. is the chairman. The family wealth has substantially decreased from what it was in the founder's day, as often happens with most great families as the decades go on. But the impact that the Rockefeller family has can never be wiped from the history books. However, as great as these families are, there are even more families whose worldwide grasp can only be described as insane. The family we will be discussing in the next minute is so powerful it bailed out the United States government twice. Later in the video, we will talk about another family so powerful they have single-handedly created a political dynasty that has reshaped the world politically. Let's go on. Next on the list is the illustrious Morgan family. The Morgan family is an American family and banking dynasty which became prominent in the US and throughout the world in the late 19th century and early 20th century. Members of the family amassed an immense fortune over the generations, primarily through the noted work of John Pierpont, J.P. Morgan, who lived from 1837 to 1913. J.P. Morgan became one of the wealthiest and most powerful businessmen in the world through his founding of private banks and industrial consolidation in the late 1800s. Born into a prominent New England family in 1837, J.P. Morgan began his career in the New York financial industry in the late 1850s. He co-founded the banking firm that became J.P. Morgan & Co. in 1871. And in the 1880s, he established himself as a power player in the country's railroad industry. The immense scope of Morgan's power came to light in the wake of the Panic of 1893. With U.S. gold reserves seriously depleted, Morgan formed a syndicate of international investors willing to supply gold in exchange for a favorable rate on 30-year bonds. He then reassured a skeptical President Grover Cleveland by citing an obscure 1862 statute that gave the Secretary of Treasury the power to pull off such a transaction without congressional approval. The syndicate bought and quickly resold the bonds in early 1895, stabilizing the shaky economy. That year, JP again reorganized his company into JP Morgan & Co. The firm soon became a major player in the steel industry by financing the formation of Federal Steel in 1898. 3 years later, after purchasing Andrew Carnegie's steel company for nearly $500 million, Morgan merged the entities into U.S. Steel, creating the first billion-dollar corporation. Along with amassing immense wealth through the creation of such corporations as U.S. Steel, Morgan had led efforts to bail out the U.S. Treasury in 1895, and he would repeat that act again in 1907. These were feats that were unfathomable, and the U.S. has since taken measures to ensure that they will never again be that vulnerable. Morgan was so powerful that to commemorate his passing, the New York Stock Exchange remained closed until noon on the day of his funeral. Now, long after he is gone, his family business has remained a financial powerhouse into the 21st century. To date, through financial strings and a firm hold on Wall Street, the Morgan family continues to move the world around, $1 at a time. In a minute, we will be talking about yet another US-based family that controls the world. This one, however, with an affinity for the disastrous. The Dupont family is a French-descended American family whose fortune was founded on explosive powders and textiles, and who diversified later into other areas of manufacturing. Pierre Samuel Dupont de Nemours was the son of a Parisian watchmaker and a member of a Burgundian Huguenot family, and descendant of a minor noble family on his mother's side. He and his sons, Victor-Marie Dupont and Éleuthère-Irénée Dupont, migrated from France in 1800 to the United States, and used the resources of their Huguenot heritage to found one of the most prominent of American families, and one of its most successful corporations, E.I. Dupont Nemours & Company, initially established by Éleuthère-Irénée as a gunpowder manufacturer. Over time, the Dupont Company grew into the largest black powder manufacturing firm in the world. The family remained in control of the company up through the 1960s, and family trusts still own a substantial amount of the company's stock today. This and other companies run by the Dupont family employed up to 10% of Delaware's population at its peak. During the 19th century, the Dupont family maintained their family wealth by carefully arranged marriages between cousins, which, at the time, was the norm for many families. The family played a large part in politics during the 18th and 19th centuries, and assisted in negotiations for the Treaty of Paris and the Louisiana Purchase. Both T. Coleman and Henry A. Dupont served as U.S. senators, and Pierre S. Dupont IV served as governor of Delaware. With a close relationship with the U.S. and its allies throughout the wars, the Dupont family benefited massively by providing gunpowder, at one point up to 40% of all global gunpowder used. And throughout the Second World War and the Cold War, the Dupont family built secret facilities in conjunction with the U.S. military. The family has to date largely remained involved in military and textile affairs. Unlike most families on this list, the Duponts keep a relatively low reputation, inciting little to no backlash from the public, and being the object of almost no conspiracy theories at all. For a family with a lot of operations shrouded in mystery like so, it is no wonder that the Dupont dynasty has had its hand in the honeypot from the shadows for so long. Without a doubt, the title of the most powerful family in the world belongs to the Bush family. The Bush family is an American dynastic family that is prominent in the fields of American politics, news, sports, entertainment, and business. Best known for its involvement in politics, the family has held various national and state offices spanning across 4 generations, including U.S. senators, governors, and 2 U.S. presidents, namely George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. Among the family's other illustrious family members are a National Football League executive and 2 nationally known TV personalities, namely Billy Bush and Jenna Bush Hager. The Bush family has left an indelible mark on American politics, stretching back 4 generations to when Prescott Bush represented Connecticut in the U.S. Senate. In the decades since, the Bush family has continued to thrive and produce prominent people who have shaped not only the national landscape, but the global landscape in unbelievable ways. The Bush family comes with its plethora of opposition, especially as they have been blamed for benefiting from wars that the family's presidents pursued. But as the most public family on this list, this does not come as a surprise. One thing is for sure, though. On the vehicle of political might and strategy, the family has no doubt influenced many of the decisions that everyday people would not even know about, for better or for worse. In what is still a book being written by the family, the Bushes are, without a doubt, the most successful political dynasty in American history.